Marty, you just released a new book, publishing date today. How does that feel if you stand up and the book is out?
Yeah, the book is out. It's funny because, usually American companies release in US first and then Europe later. In this case, it was released in Europe 3 weeks before the US. So it's only today that most Americans got a copy. So that's fun.
Yeah, I just had one guy from India complaining that that the book is a little bit late in India. He would prefer if it's first shipped in India. So next time maybe. Okay, Marty, I just I don't need to introduce you. Everybody who is in watching, I guess, knows you because you just you shaped the picture of product management in the last years and the last century, 10 years, 20 years, 40 years. Yeah, you worked 40 years in product management, right? I think Inspired. Yeah, you wrote in 2008, if I'm correct, right? That's right. And it was for product manager and discovery. Then you moved up the level with Empowered on team level, right? And now Transformed. What is it? What is the main idea? With Transformed. What do you want to change in the world with this book?
Yeah. Transform is different. It's a little different. The idea was, like you said, with Inspired, we wanted to share the techniques of discovery and product teams, and in Empowered, we wanted to focus on product leaders. And the good news was a lot of people told us they really liked the books. That's good news. The bad news is so many people told us that they didn't think it was possible for them to change. They just they just said, if you saw our company, I can't tell you how many people say, if you saw our company, you would know it's impossible for us to change to work this way. Our managers, our leaders, our company, we're just never going to work that way. And, we've been working with companies for 20 years. Mostly that's what we do is help them change. And so we knew that wasn't true. But what we wanted to do was prove it and show people how to change. So the other books are really about how to do product. This book is how to change so that you can do product well. And we wanted to both show people real case studies. And by the way, one of the things that I think is special about this book is, unlike the other ones, all the examples are outside of Silicon Valley. So they're not Silicon Valley. We did, because it's, most Silicon Valley companies are born in this model, but that's not true in a lot of the world. So what we wanted to do is show companies that literally changed. And we didn't want to hide the fact that it's hard, because it is hard to change, but we wanted to show that it is possible. And then I think the most important part is we wanted to show what those companies were able to do after they transformed. So that the level of innovation that they could do. And so the book highlights companies all over the world. In several in Europe, one of my favorites in Saudi Arabia, which is not known as the tech hub, that just did an amazing job in healthcare, regulated industry, in B2B SaaS, in all these areas that so many people think it's not possible. And we wanted to show it is possible.
Yeah. Marty, I prepared a lot of questions to understand how you do the transformation. But first, let's have a short overview of the book, the content. I think, the core of the book is you laid out 3 dimensions. You have 4 competencies and you have 20 principles. Yeah. Let's, just go quickly through it. Yeah. The 3 dimensions. Can you just, give a quick overview? What is it? What's in there?
Well, first of all, the reason we did that, another difference between Inspired and Empowered in this book is Inspired and Empowered were just written for people like you and me, right? Product people, engineers, designer, product managers, product leaders. However, Transform was written for anybody in a company, from the CEO to the head of sales, to the head of finance, to marketing people, to the people on the product team. So we needed to try to describe how good companies work in a way that the whole business could understand and help. And so we don't cover the techniques, but we do cover the principles. And that's what you're getting at. And that's referred to, we also needed a name for this, and we selected the product operating model. We didn't come up with that name. Other people did. We just wanted to, we wanted something that was a conceptual model. It was neutral. It wasn't a framework or a process. So anyway, the way we, at the highest level, at the very highest level, it's actually just about moving from output to outcomes. That's the very highest level. And everybody's heard that for a long time now, move to outcomes. That's not new. What's new is how do you do that? Because that is much easier said than done. All right. So how do you do that? That really means changing, in most companies, it means changing three big things. The first is, how do you decide what to work on? How do you decide the most important problems to solve? What are the opportunities to pursue? What are the challenges or threats to address? That's what most companies call product planning. But how do you decide which problems to solve? In good product companies, they do that differently. It is primarily around product strategy. So that's the first area. The second area is, how do you solve those problems? In most companies that have not moved to this model, they have feature factories and feature teams. And so the teams are given roadmaps and of features and projects, and they're just asked to design and code them. And moving to the product model, that is very different. That's the difference between a feature team and an empowered product team. That's the difference between product design and product discovery. So product discovery is the heart of changing how you solve problems. And then the third big dimension is changing how you build, test, and deploy your solutions. So if you want to prove outcomes, you need to be able to have everything instrumented, all the analytics, all the telemetry, all the monitoring, so that you can show that your new change is delivering the outcome you need. You also need to take care of your customers. And so these are the reasons why we change how we build. Now, this is sort of a messy one, because this was supposed to be the reason companies moved to Agile. But as you probably know, a lot of companies think they're Agile, but they're releasing once every quarter. And and even once every month is not Agile, and it's not helpful. So we had to be more clear about, what does it really mean to change how you build? And so those are the three things at the highest level: changing how you decide what problems to work on, changing how you decide how you solve those problems, and changing how you build and deliver those solutions. Okay, so if you double click on that, how do you do that? Well, first of all, it requires 4 new competencies that, in most companies that have not transformed, they need to develop these competencies. Now, this is another messy one, because most companies think they have these people already, because they often have these titles, but they don't have these jobs. And what we're talking about is serious product managers, not feature team product managers, but serious empowered product managers, professional product designers, and professional engineering tech leads. And then the product leaders that are responsible for developing these people. Those are the 4 new competencies, at a very high level. And then, of course, what do those people do? Well, they do product strategy, which I mentioned. They do product discovery. They do product delivery. So those 3 things are kind of well known. They also are really fundamentally about creating good product teams and establishing a good, solid product culture, which is really about how you make decisions and how you empower people. So those are the concepts, those 5 critical concepts. And then, stop me anytime, because I could go all day on this. But the next level is, when you look at these concepts, what they really boil down to is a set of first principles. And this is what I think is most important in the product model, because Anybody who's ever worked with, say, a company like Apple and a company like Amazon, they're very different in culture. However, they're very consistent in the principles. And so to me, what's important is the principles. That's why there is no one good way to do product. There's many good ways to do product, just like there's many bad ways to do product. What matters are those principles. So, and there are 20 principles that we go through in the book. I won't try to explain all 20 in a few minutes here, but an example of a common product principle, an important product principle, is the need to embrace experimentation. Most companies don't do that, actually. They don't experiment. Or when they do, they just do these trivial little optimizations, like we'll try changing this color to blue and we'll see how it does. That's not really an experiment. That's not what we mean by an experiment. We mean trying something much bolder. And so that's product discovery, of course, and the skills to do that. But that's a principle. One way or another, whatever techniques you want to use, you need to embrace experimentation. I mean, I could keep going. There's principles around there's principles around culture. There's principles around delivery. There's principles around all this. But that's what's important. And that's the first. That's really the first half of the book, is to describe what it means to work this way. Then the second half of the book, since you asked, the second half of the book is how do you change? How do you move to this model? And we shared what we do and have done for a while. For us, it starts with an assessment. And we shared our actual assessment, the questions we used. So you can do this yourself. You don't have to, you know, you can do this yourself. And it'll take you a little longer, but it's worth doing. And I think there's no reason people can't do it. And then you can understand, because if you want to transform, first you need to know what you're transforming to. And that's what we just talked about. But then you have to know what you're transforming from. You have to know where you are right now, and every company is somewhere different. And so the assessment will tell you where you are. When you have that assessment and you have the destination, then you can prioritize your work. And you can say what's most important for this company now. And that leads to a transformation plan. And then that leads to a whole bunch of techniques to help you transform, depending on where the areas you need to transform are.
Excellent. I looked up who's in this call today, and we have a lot of product leaders, about a third, and product managers, and then we have adjacent roles here. You've been talking on our conference last year, and we had a lot of conversations. And let me paint a picture of where I think a lot of companies stand today, right? And let's just take a product leader, maybe somebody who's listening to this conversation. Many of them told me a similar story, and it goes like that. They all read your books, you know, they know how to do that. And the tech and product team are actually enthusiastic to work like you described that, right? And they try it, and it's almost like a bubble, right? Where they try to apply your thinking, but the world around them, the rest of the company, they have just a different mindset. And it's mostly project driven, right? The handover, what they need to be done, right? They give them feature requests, and it's just total different mindset.
Yeah.
So what do you tell those people how to start the transformation?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you just answered your original question. You said it better than I did. That is exactly why we wrote the new book, because I hear what you hear. I've been hearing that every day for more than 10 years, virtually every day. So that is very normal for people. It's just very normal, unless they happen to already work this way. And then they say, well, we're already doing this. But if they're not, this is the problem. And so I mean, I'm not trying to sell books right now, but the reason we wrote this was to answer your question, just literally right there. And so we said, well, okay, let's talk about how we think you should go about this, because this is what's hard. But if you look between the lines, Thomas, what they're pointing out is that it's not really that hard to change the product people, right? The designers, the engineers, the product manager. The hard part is changing the head of finance, the head of sales, the head of marketing, the CEO, the legal officer, the compliance officer. And that's why transformation is hard, because it impacts the whole company. It really does. There are very few people that are not impacted in a transformation. So that's why I was saying, that's why we had to describe that in a way the whole company can understand. But let's talk more generally for a minute, because a lot of those product leaders, they think, I mean, what I'm sharing right now is very similar to the kind of one-on-one coaching that I do with product leaders. And they'll say something like, my head of sales doesn't want to do this. My head of CEO doesn't want to do this. They don't want to change. And so and they're like, my hands are tied. I can't do that. And I spend time showing them, you can do much more than you think you can do. Now you have to earn that trust. You have to show the leaders, you have to show the head of sales that you understand their situation, you understand their customers, which are also your customers. You have to show the CEO that this is actually a more effective way of working. So I try to encourage those people to show what they can do. You can earn every level here. You can even start as an individual contributor and start showing your manager what you can really do.
Let's stick for a moment for the product with the product leader. So what I hear typically is, okay, I could approach my CEO, but like having such a huge one-off thing, that maybe there is not enough trust. Influencing the people which are on the same level, like marketing, sales, whatsoever. You don't have the authority to tell them what to do, right? It's different with their own role, like, okay, help the product manager in their division, but that's typically not the solution, right? So what would you suggest? Go to the same level people, try to nudge them into the product model, or go through the CEO and bring it downwards? Or like what's the best strategy from your experience,
right?
How to do that, right?
Well, it's a good question. Well, first of all, I should say, I don't think there is one answer to that, because it depends on a lot of things. It depends on the size of the company. That makes a big difference. In real big companies, we recommend you do division by division. Don't try to do it all at once. With small companies, you can be much more aggressive. But let me just say, there are many techniques, and I said half the book describes techniques. However, there is one technique in particular that we recommend more than anything else, which I think is the more direct answer to your question. And that's a technique that's called pilot teams. By the way, we didn't invent any of this. This stuff has been around. We're just sharing it. Pilot teams mean, let's say you've got the scenario you described. The company is skeptical. They don't want to, and they're right, by the way, to not want to just switch all at once. That is a very dangerous thing to do. It's risky, because you might actually hurt before you help. You don't want to do that. So what we recommend is pilot teams. What that says is that you go with your colleagues and say, look, do we believe we need to transform? Most of the time, the other leaders do believe that things need to get better. It's either a competitive threat or financial rewards, whatever it is. There's some reason. They say, okay, let's do an experiment. Let's try this for one or a small number of product teams. Let's see together how well this works. If it works well, we can spread it around. We can grow to more teams. If it doesn't work well, we can either try again with a different approach, or maybe that's not for us. So a pilot team is a safe, non-threatening, low-risk way of trying out these things and letting your sales organization decide, is this better than what we had or not as good as what we had? Letting your marketing people, everybody in the company observe. So that's our go-to technique. There are lots of other variations of that. Like we can do pilot teams for each of those 3 dimensions so that each team is working on different things. So there's a lot more variations here, but the most important concept is you don't have to try this out for the whole company. You can try it out on just a product team, which I think in general is the smart thing to do.
Yeah, so basically you suggest an experiment to your peers on the same level and say, okay, let's try whether we can, have a better solution and more satisfying working culture around us and better results.
Most importantly is because you can make the work culture argument, but most of your stakeholders will not be sympathetic to that. The real argument that works for most stakeholders is the outcomes.
Output.
Right. They want business results. If you can show them that they get more outcome for the money, that's what speaks to most stakeholders.
At the end of the day, it all comes back to the purse, right?
I mean, that's just the way business works. So, but what's interesting is I find this is true in nonprofits as well. Nonprofits,
absolutely.
They have even less money, so they care about getting real results for what they spend.
I think the difference between a business and a nonprofit is 10% profit margin. The business takes it for themselves, and the nonprofit just distributes it and makes the service cheaper. But and inherently, you need to have a valid business model, otherwise it never works. Otherwise, it's just give away. So let's double click on the on that thought, right? Have one team run, because there is a lot of structure in place, which makes that hard to do actually, right? You have a annual planning and stuff like that, right? You have a lot of structure, and changing a company always means changing people, right? If I'm used to hand over the product team a solution which I require for 10 years, right? Mm-hmm. It's hard to adapt in the with this sample or test team, right? How do you facilitate that, or how do you do that? What's
what you're spot on. What makes it hard is the people, right? We're talking about a change management process for a lot of people. So that's not to sound like a broken record, but that is why we like pilot teams, because it is much more, it's much gentler for the people when it is, let's play this through. Because your scenario is very realistic. So let's say the company agrees that in principle, it makes sense to try this with a product team. But then they say, the CFO says, but we still have a funding process based on projects. So what do you do with the annual planning process? What we suggest, it's very easy, lots of people have done this, is that they go to the CFO and say, in support of this experiment, rather than funding a project, can you just fund a product team for some number of quarters? It might be 1 quarter, it might be 3 or 4 quarters, whatever. Which is a very minor change for the finance people. They can do that, and then we tell them, and instead of funding a project, which is output, you're funding an outcome, and which of course is finance. It's like, that's what matters to us is the outcomes, and their biggest frustration is usually because they fund projects but they don't get outcomes. And now they're able to more directly fund an outcome. And the hope is the team will come much closer to delivering that outcome, maybe even exceed that outcome. That's what we're hoping for. So, so that's a minor change to finance. It's a minor change to planning. And everybody knows we're doing this as part of an experiment. And if it works well, great. It's not a very big change to the model. If it doesn't work well, it has been very low risk test.
Okay. I guess for different stakeholders in the company, it's presumably mostly the same discussion, right? finance will mostly come around. Yeah.
I picked
Is
finance.
that the objections?
That's usually the hardest one.
Okay. I thought sales actually, you know, to be
no,
honest.
that's a great one. Sales is another hard one. It is. Now, a lot of companies don't actually have a direct sales organization, but they all have finance organization. But if you have a direct sales model, then building trust with sales is usually the most important hurdle. And in fact, one of the case studies in the new book I'm most excited about sharing with the world is a very heavily sales-driven company in the B2B SaaS world. These are typically the last places to be open to the product model. And a company that they had tried, you know, they were not getting the results. So they transformed. And it tells the story of how the product organization earned the trust of sales. And I will tell you, one of the remarkable things that they did was that the product teams took salespeople along with literally hundreds of customer visits. And it did not take long before sales realized that product knew much more about what it took to make a customer successful than they were even aware of. And that was the key to them building systems that actually their customers loved, which of course nobody likes that better than sales.
Interesting. Typically it's the other way around, right? Sales is protecting their key accounts, and they want to...
They're doing that because they don't trust product. And to earn trust of sales, you have to show that you understand this. The case study is on a company called DataSite, and I encourage anybody, because a lot of people will say, I mean, look, you hear these excuses all over the place. We have a direct sales organization. We can't do the product model. We're in a regulated industry. We can't do the product model. We build hardware. We can't do the product model. We're a brick and mortar company. We can't do the product model. None of these are true. And the best way to show they're not true is to show them counterexamples. So I'm hoping those counterexamples will open people's eyes to what's possible. I do know, though, I'm not naive, because there are a lot of people that are just looking for a reason not to change. That's, again, human nature. And so at the very least, there will always be people that say our company is different.
So I guess the product model in action section and the overcoming objections should guide readers, you know, through these discussions, right?
That's the hope. I think it's worth calling out. I didn't mention that yet. One of the longest sections in the book is entitled Overcoming Objections. And the truth is, there are always some people that just don't want to change. We were just talking about them. But the more realistic problem is that people are willing to change, but they have legitimate objections. For example, the finance person does not understand how it will work in the new model, and they want to know. Their job is to protect the assets of the company, so they should know. Or sales doesn't understand, and they want to understand how this changes when product teams go directly to customers. Or compliance officers or legal officers need to understand how they do their job in the product model. And so we've been hearing these objections for many years, and we think they're all legitimate objections. We just shared the objection and shared our answer to those objections so that any company that tries to transform is prepared for those questions.
What is your preferred way, or what is, you know, the best practice to bring these thoughts into the organization? Do you have like a management circle where you discuss these topics, or do you do it one-on-one, or like what is your, you know, out of your experience, you went through that process many times. What works best?
Well, I do think you know, different product coaches have different approaches, and there's not just one way that works. And my partners and I, we get together twice a year in person, and we always talk about what we've learned about, do we want to change any of our recommendations here? How does this, because that's basically what my partners do all the time. So our best guidance is what we included in the book. So, and it's a little complicated, but it starts with an executive briefing. Because unless the senior executive team understands what we've been talking about, you and I here for the last half hour, unless they understand that, they can't make it. Even if they agree to support a transformation, they need to know what they're getting into, because pretty soon they will figure it out. It is important for them to understand in advance what they're getting into. So we like to start with an executive briefing. That's about 2 to 3 hours with the senior leadership team. And it talks about what the product model is really about, why companies change to it, and what it would mean for them. So that's an executive briefing. And if the company, and we tell them, like, don't move forward unless you believe you want to do this. We want to answer your questions, but only move forward if you think it's the right thing for your company. If they do decide to move forward, we start with an assessment. I was mentioning that before, an assessment. So now we need to see where they really are. And then that assessment leads to a planning, we call them a transformation planning workshop, basically, where you chart out your plan. What is, like, for example, if we recommend a pilot team, which team would be the pilot team, or how many pilot teams, and what should each pilot team pursue? These are the kinds of questions we're answering in that pilot team workshop. And then there's very often some training required, because I mentioned those competencies. If they don't have people with those skills, they need to learn those skills. Otherwise, the whole thing falls apart. So that might be required depending on the company. Another thing we usually recommend is the help of product coaches. Product coaches are independent coaches. We don't have any financial ties with any of them. But some companies, the leaders have never done this before, so they need a product leadership coach. Many companies have never done product discovery before. We might recommend a product discovery coach. Sometimes the senior executives have never worked in this way before, and they need a transformation coach. There are sometimes the engineers have never actually done real continuous deployment. They need a delivery coach. There are different scenarios that come up in the assessment. And in some of those cases, we will recommend a product coach.
Interesting. So, like, I just put my head into the position of, a product leader listening. And I ask myself, okay, executive briefing, it sounds easy, but actually, like, we want to transform, but we might have in our back head, okay, it's easier to start with a pilot team, right? So how do you structure that? Like, do you really sell, okay, we need to change something and let's transform, or do you frame it, okay, let's have a pilot if we can do better, get better outcomes with different product model, or like, how do you structure something like that?
This is what I meant when I said there's a lot of different scenarios here. Let me just give you the two common extreme scenarios. One is that the CEO is the one that reaches out to us or to whoever. But when they reach out to us, the CEO is often because now they're scared. They have a big competitive threat. They're like, okay, we've been messing around with Agile. We haven't got anywhere. We need to get serious about this. And they're like, what do we do? All right, that's one scenario, right? Because that's the easy one, right? From the top. It's the easiest, but it's also the one that's under the most time pressure. So it's, in one way, it's the hardest, but that's one scenario. Another scenario is the CEO doesn't know anything about this stuff, but one of the product leaders calls us and says, we want to do an experiment and try to show the company what we can do. Both of those are very common ways these transformations can start. One is coming more bottom up. The other one is coming more top down. And then there's the most common is probably in between. It's the chief product officer who already has some level of support from the CEO. The CEO has probably said something like the goals for the year include transformation. And so the CPO is assigned that responsibility, and now they don't know what that really means, but they want to learn. All of these are possible scenarios. That's why it's hard to give just one answer there.
Okay. I want to read out a short section in your book. 329, if somebody want to read later on, the role of the CEO, because we just discussed that. While theoretically not impossible, it's extremely difficult to transform successfully without the active support of the CEO. The other items in this list will make obvious why this is the case. And to be clear, when the CEO decides just to designate some leader as being responsible for digital transformation, that is not what we are talking about. This common mistake makes it all too easy for the rest of the company continue business as usual. I found this really important in the whole book. It's at the very end, but it actually says, okay, if you don't have the CEO on board, you don't need to start. Or do I misinterpret that there?
You'll also find in the introductory chapters a breakout on exactly this topic. So you'll see it at the front of the book, and you'll see it at the end of the book as well. It is a very important point. And this is why we tell people this is not an IT thing. Transformation is not just your technology organization. It impacts the whole company. It's not hard to see. It impacts HR. It impacts finance, like we just talked about. It impacts sales and marketing, like we just talked about. So unless you have the support of the senior leader, you are going to run into roadblocks with those other parts of the company. Now, that said, even if you have that high-level support, you need to earn the trust. So most of the work is on the teams to show that they have earned that trust and earned that ability to get these experiments run and adopted.
What do you do? I mean, it's not easy to have the CEO on board. And if it's such a crucial position, and I totally understand, right? So, what do you do if you don't have the support of the CEO yet?
That's the scenario I was describing, where we strongly recommend position it as an experiment, and just say, and by the way, if it's a big company, it's an experiment within one business unit of the big company. So you are, and let the leaders share this experiment with the CEO when the time is right. But what you're really doing is showing the company in a very safe, responsible way that we can do this experiment. And if it works, I have never met a CEO that didn't want better outcomes. It's just they don't exist. They do. They might not understand all the stuff we're talking about because they come from a different part of the company, but they can appreciate outcomes.
So now we talked a lot about, a product leader, what he or she can do to influence the company. Let's make the challenge a little bit harder. Say you're a product manager, or, you just started off as a product owner or something like that, right? What would you tell them how they can influence, or can they influence the organization?
Yeah, well, this is the most common, really. And I probably share this advice more than really anything else I can think of. Somebody is, let's say, your audience is primarily in Europe, and unfortunately, product owners are very prevalent there. And I tell product owners that I'm very nervous for your job. I don't think it's a real job. I think what you want to do to protect yourself is up-level your skills to a product manager. And I have never seen a company where any manager or any leader prevents somebody from up-leveling their skills. They might not pay for it. They might not understand it. But if somebody goes to the effort of raising their skills, from a product owner to a product manager, at the least, they'll be appreciated. In my experience, those are people that, okay, all of a sudden there's somebody who really understands our customers. There's somebody who really understands the data. There's somebody who actually understands the business. We should promote that person because that's who the stakeholders want to work with. At the very least, they'll probably get a promotion. Now, does that mean they can do everything we're talking about? Not yet. Probably not yet. Probably not for a while. Because an individual can influence their team, and their team can start to show the rest of the company what's possible. But there is limitations. For example, are you gonna get the head of marketing and the head of legal on board and stuff? Probably not. But can you show what you're capable of? Can you show what that you can do to deliver outcomes? Can you show with prototypes what? It's amazing what a prototype in discovery could do to get the rest of the company excited about what you're doing. So the point is, even an individual contributor can start to win hearts and minds. And I strongly encourage everybody to do that. Honestly, I was encouraging that even before the rise of generative AI. And now I tell people if they don't, they could be in trouble. There's not a lot that's safe in a product owner role. A product manager is a much higher value, higher conceptual role, because a product manager is worried about value and viability. And those are the heart of every product company.
And I mean, same. We see that as well, right? If you have a product manager and they, go through a training or something like that, their environment will feel and understand. They sense it, right? And if you're better, you get more.
The key is they have to actually, because there's a lot of different training out there, and the key is you have to be more than a project manager.
Yeah, definitely.
You have to be more than a product owner. You have to really build these new skills. Now, I believe, and I have coached a lot of people on this, and I was coached myself, that you can generally raise your skills to a real product manager on the order of 3 months of work. I don't think that's that long. We're not talking about a 4-year, internship or anything. Yeah. We're talking about 3 months. If the person is, hopefully being coached by somebody that's been there, done that, or, and I should say, the person is willing to put in the effort.
Hearts and minds, they said that win hearts and minds. And actually it sounds like not only the task for the product manager, but also for the product leader, right?
Absolutely.
Win hearts and minds.
It's primarily on the product leader, their hearts and minds.
Well, what are the crucial skills one must acquire in order to, transform the company? Because, like we spoke a lot about, outcome and experimentation and stuff like that, but actually it sounds more like a soft skill job, to emphasize with the person and win their hearts and minds.
Well, let's talk about that. So I was just saying, for an individual product owner to become a product manager, I believe we can normally do that on the order of 3 months. For a product leader in a feature team company to become a product leader in a real product company in the product model is a much bigger set of work. That's not 3 months. That's bigger. The book Empowered is really written for those people to learn what they need to do. And in that book really talks about 2 big categories of work. The first is learning how to coach your people, because that is the primary job of a manager in product design or engineering, is to coach their people. So they have to start doing that. They are responsible for the skills of their people. That's a big change and a big job. The second half of what they do is strategic context, which are, again, totally new skills for most of these product leaders. Product vision, product strategy, team topology, team objectives. This is these are new skills for these product leaders. Most of that, a little bit, they've been doing some team topology, but in a feature team company, they don't do most of this work. So the big pressure is on those product leaders. And so I push harder on the product leaders. They are the ones. And by the way, they're the ones, if a product transformation does not happen, that's really who we hold accountable. That's really, those are the people right at the center of this. And the way they win those hearts and minds is by doing their job, which builds trust, which then lets you win over the rest of the people in the company. So it starts with raising your game as a product leader.
Marty, AI is everywhere these days. What is the implication for the product managers, and especially, you know, under transformed, like how transform the transformation of the company? What is the influence of the technology on that process?
I mean, first of all, we're still very, very early. So we're all sort of figuring this out. But one thing we know for sure, there's sort of two elements to this. One is a lot of companies, the reason they want to transform is to take advantage of this technology in their products. In other words, they know they need a new generation of products. And those products are powered by generative AI. And so they need new skills in order to be doing this. That's one of the motivations for a lot of the companies right now that are transforming. They feel like if they don't, they will be disrupted by competitors that do. The other category is, how does generative AI impact the roles of, or how we build products themselves? And that's where, like, how does it impact the product owner? How does it impact the product manager? How does it impact the designer? It's much easier to talk about how it impacts engineers and designers because that's already happening. I mean, it's happening everywhere, but mostly just with toys. You know what I mean? Little things that people are doing opportunistically. With engineers, it's, in many companies, it's real. It's real. The tools are significantly better and really helping developers. And there's got lots of short-term and long-term implications of that. Designers, it's already happening. Like, you wouldn't want to be just a graphic designer today. If you are just in university, that is not a good career job, because most of that, I think, is going to be replaced. Now, my prediction, and I could be wrong, is that product designers, which are operating here, service design, interaction design, they will be more valuable, not less valuable. But visual design and graphic design will be more automated than ever before. So you would want to focus on where you can provide real value. And then, of course, I think in principle, the same things exist in product management, but there it's fuzzier. I do think, you know, when I look at a product owner responsibilities, and there are already tools coming out that will basically recommend prioritization of your backlog and interact with Jira. And, you know, it's like, okay, do you really want to be a product owner? I don't think that's a good long-term career prospects, especially since so much of that is even better done by the engineers themselves, and many of those engineers would prefer to do it. So I think there's a lot of reasons that's a dangerous long-term role. On the other hand, when you talk about real product management, then you're making real decisions about value and viability, and generative AI tools are tools to help you with that if they're used well. That's another conversation, because right now a lot of teams are struggling to figure out how to use it helpfully versus make worse decisions faster.
Yeah. I mean, how I look at that, and you know that better. I mean, you're 40 years in product management, right? But in the 80s, 90s, like we did different product management, and like digital shifted everything, right? It's a different type of product management, right?
I mean, I've been doing
wonder,
digital for 40 plus years, so it hasn't really changed much actually for those that were building tech-powered products, but it is a completely different thing for those that were developing, say, a new beer, right? If you're doing a new beer, that's consumer packaged goods. That's that has, I've never actually worked with that kind of product, so I don't know, but in tech-powered companies, the principles are remarkably consistent.
Marty, we're in Europe. You have a lot of, you're born out, like out of the Silicon Valley. Much of the thinking comes from Silicon Valley. You say, okay, there's a lot of examples, in America, and also from, Southeast Asia, and also from England is in the book. But still, I think product management and the mindset is different in America and in Europe. Yeah. Do you have for transformation, is there an implication you see how you treat European versus American companies?
I mean, the truth is some of the best companies in the world are European-based, and best product model companies in the world are European-based. I mean, look at how I love Spotify, and I think people were confused about what Spotify was really about, but they're a beautiful example of a company doing just the same principles as the best product companies anywhere else. San Francisco, Seattle, New York, doesn't matter. There are amazing companies in Israel. There's amazing companies in India. There's amazing companies in Germany. So I don't think, and the other thing I should point out is we have the same problems in most of the US. Honestly, you don't have to leave San Francisco to find terrible product companies. There are right across the street from each other. You could have a great one and a terrible one. That's another discussion. But I do think, because my lens is kind of different. It's not like Germany, UK, US. My lens is the people. I know better product people in France, in Germany, in Sweden, in Norway, in the UK. To me, I see those people and I say there is no reason they can't build some of the best products in the world. It is true that in some countries, management is less open to this, right? Less open to this. This is especially clear in places like Japan, Korea, to a lesser extent, France, where there are views of leadership that are less friendly to this idea of empowering people to show what they could do. And so we have more work to do in those places. But even in those places, there's some amazing teams in Japan today. There's some amazing teams in Korea today. They're more on the early stage of the curve right now, because those are cultural things that kind of get in the way. So, for example, one of the principles that you'll see is this necessary friction in a product team. But as you probably know, in some parts of the world, the pressure to not disagree is so high that it makes it very hard to have the necessary friction and real collaboration that we need to innovate. So there are sometimes cultural things that get in the way. But my view is there is no reason, as long as you have the raw talent, and you know Europe better than I do, but the raw talent there is amazing. The universities are amazing. The people with the skills are amazing. It's just, I encourage them to show what their own people can do, learn what their own people can do.
Well, that's really good news for Europe. Yeah, that's really good. Well, Marty, I really hope that this is a huge success. I think, I I started like 15 years ago. I was got into context with Lean Startup, and for me, it made immediately click, because I thought, okay, if we can, just leverage that knowledge and be 5-10% more efficient in building new startups. And in your case, with this book, it's just products. It's not startups, but it's products. If we can be more efficient, that will be a huge contribution and wealth creation for all the people who work in the companies, the company itself, but also society. So I'm really enthusiastic. I hope more people work the way you describe, and more people are able with this book to go in the right direction. Marty, let me just tell the viewers about our conference, which you have been last year. It's Just Product Conference, and it's free. Yeah, you great speakers like you. Yeah, last year we will get a great speakers. It's the Just Product Conference, takes place on 11th of October. So if you joined this conversation and liked it, I'm sure you will like the conference as well, right? I will close this call, this conversation on time, because I know you have an appointment at 10. But I want to leave you a little bit space at the end to, have the last words on this conversation.
Well, I mean, I appreciate the invitation. I just hope this conversation was useful. I know that, and this is not aimed at Europe, this is all over the world. I understand that people are skeptical, because I've been hearing that for 10 years, since the first version of Inspired. So I understand that. I hope people are motivated enough by the possibility to at least read the stories of the companies that transformed. Read how they transformed. And by the way, just full disclosure, none of them were easy. They were all hard, but they did it. So you can hopefully see that it is possible. And then what I really hope you like is what they were able to do with that skill, the outcomes they were able to achieve, the level of innovation they were able to achieve. To me, that's the most inspiring part of this. That's what keeps me doing this. When I meet a team that is able to do something amazing, it's awesome. And so I hope that people open their mind a little bit to what they might be able to do. And if you give it a try, and if you have other questions, maybe that's the last thing I'll mention. We talked about the objections set in the book. I mean, that represented more than 10 years of objections we'd collected. However, we know that people will identify other objections. So there is already an article on the svpg.com site. It's called Transformed FAQ. And it's already got the first questions, because the book has been out in Europe now for a couple of weeks. And so some people read it and posted some questions. So I already put my, those questions and my answers to those. And that will probably continue to grow. But if anybody reads the book, and does have other objections or questions, feel free to send them to me, and I will add them to the list. So I hope that was useful. And thanks everybody for spending some time with us.
Yeah, just had some comments here. Great talk. Congrats to the book. We have here great discussion. Thomas Marty, Pavel. Greetings to Pavel. I know you had a conversation with him the other day. Marty, thank you very much. For me, it was super helpful. It shaded some light on some aspects I couldn't read in the book, and that's the thing I tried to achieve. Actually, not replicate and speak about the book. It's really recommended. Read the book. If you're just starting out, of course, read the other books Marty written. Thank you. Have a great day. Enjoy the day. It's not every day you can release a book, so really enjoy the day. Have a good day. Marty, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.